we have to forgive everybody if they don't accept our stories. But I'm sorry that happened to you because a lot of these radio shows, most of us came from radio at some point in our lives doing radio shows when the bigger companies are writing newspapers. But, everybody's got a different history. So for all y'all that do want to call in and join us every week, we'll be here to join them. But, Ronnie, you've got a good personality, so you will be the anchor for this show. And do you care if Tommy says something? He's been hanging on, but let him tell his Bigfoot story. Tommy, you want to tell your Bigfoot story in New Jersey?
My Bigfoot story? Yeah.
Yeah, tell him.
Want it.
Well, if you don't care, but yeah, tell your Bigfoot story so you'll be on here.
All right, well, mine was up in Wanacue, New Jersey. I work with a person named Sergeant 18, and we went up there like 4 days a week filming UFOs and all kinds of strange phenomena up there. But it was one day we stopped by the reservoir, which they flooded. They flooded a city there. It's the most important story in the UFO world, which nobody talks about. But the city was flooded, and it was up in Wanacue, New Jersey. And there's a lake there, and then they built this bridge that connected Jersey to New York State. So we were up there. We got there early, so we stopped by this bridge, and we pulled over. And he wanted to do a few things. I said, well, let me just take a short walk. When we go out, we have like 2 cameras, two flashlights. I walk with a staff and a knife when we go out, and we usually load up before we start walking on the land. But I said, well, let me just take a short walk up the road. I got halfway up the road, and I heard this squeaking sound. I don't know if you're familiar with much about the Montauk Project, what they released and what happened, but the story was they called it the Hershey monkey. So I thought it was that. So I'm walking through the woods, and I pull into the weeds, and I start going in between the trees and everything. And then all of a sudden, it's just dead silence, and I just said, uh-oh. And then I felt breathing down my back. So I slowly turned my head. The moon was out. It was about 9:30 at night. The moon was out, and it was really bright out. As I turned around, there was a Bigfoot about a foot away from me, standing above me, looking down at me. I reached for my camera, realizing I didn't have my camera. I didn't have my staff in my hand. I didn't have nothing. So I started running back to the truck, screaming to the 2 people. I had a scientist in the truck, Bruce Cornett, and Sergeant 18 in the truck. And I'm screaming, get the cameras. Because I thought, sure, it was running, because it stamped on a log, and it just snapped this log right in half. So I'm running all the way back to the truck. I get back to the truck. Neither one of them were moving. They had the doors locked. I said, open the door, get the cameras. Neither one of them would open the door. And I'm saying, come on, there's something over there. Finally, Sergeant 18 rolls the window down just a little. He goes, what did you see? I said, there's a Bigfoot there, come on. And he goes, no, I don't deal with those kind of things. I only deal with aliens. And I said, well, they're aliens just as much as anything else is. But finally, 5 minutes later, now Bruce Cornett's a scientist, and he's got all these degrees, and he's just sitting there frozen solid. He won't move. So I open the door, and I step out. I get him to come out. And then it's still dead silence. And he goes, what'd you see? I said, it was a giant Bigfoot standing right next to me. Then all of a sudden it started howling. We've been on these mountains for 3 years. We never heard a Bigfoot scream. We never heard a wolf howl, ever, in the 3 years that we were up there. And we were up there almost every day, at least 3 or 4 days a week. Winter snow, in the summer, no matter what. So now, all of a sudden, we hear this howling. I mean, all the shows that portray a Bigfoot screaming, it's exactly how it sounds. I'd say a cross between a baby scream and like a big animal scream put together. And it was going on for about 5 minutes. It would happen every 30 seconds. It would scream real loud. And then all of a sudden it stopped to a dead silence again. And I said, what happened? What happened? All of a sudden at that point, which is actually about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after I saw it, all the wolves from all parts of the mountain were howling. I mean, like I said, we were there many days, night, or half of the night, and we never heard a wolf howl. All of them were howling around the different mountains. And I only found out not too long ago that there's the stories of the wolves that follow the Bigfoot. Whether they go after the food it eats, I have no clue. I mean, I never figured that part out. But it was just bizarre because now the scream stopped, and then like these wolves are howling, and it echoed around the whole mountain. And then within 5 minutes that stopped, and it was back to dead silence. But what was really outrageous about that whole thing, the next morning, we wanted to go up there to see if there was any kind of footprints or anything. And I saw what they call, I call it the Hershey monkey. I don't know what it was, but it was little, and it was running through the weeds, and I started chasing it. And it jumped right into a tree, not into a hole in the tree. It just jumped right into the tree, and then it was gone. But at that point, I started trekking. I was friends with a couple people involved with the Montauk Project, and they said, well, that one of the few of the creatures that escaped, one was on Long Island, one was got off in New Jersey somehow, and they were talking about the different creatures that got out of there. But the whole thing, like at that night, lasted about 15 minutes. But I never got a picture of it. The next day we went out there, we couldn't find any kind of tracks because it was really lots of trees down and all kinds of stuff, so it's not like a place where you would see a footprint. But the following night, we went to where Tesla was working with DuPont, and I don't want to get into the stories too much because I don't want everybody to think I'm that crazy, but when we went out there, we heard these screams in the air, and at that point, we had our cameras out. We couldn't see anything, and picture just like any movie you ever saw of a flying bird creature, the screeching sound that it would make. There was 5 of us there, and we heard it coming over our head real loud, and you could feel the energy from the wings flapping, like that, and it was echoing through the ground. We still didn't see anything. I mean, like I said, at that point the moon was still out, and there was I couldn't see it, the shadow of it or anything. And then all of a sudden, we hear a crash, and all these rocks started falling down the mountain. So we decided to leave that night. And then the following day, which is actually the 3rd day, we went back there. We had 2 footprints of the bird landing on the ground, and we got pictures of that. I mean, whether it was a visible or invisible creature, whatever was flying there, we heard it, we saw it. There was like 5 of us there all together. But it really kind of changed our viewpoint of what was up there. But this is where Tesla worked, and Tesla was doing all his work with DuPont. And they flooded a city there. That's when they put the Wanacue Reservoir in. During that time frame, and this is what nobody talks about, for 6.5 to 8 months, the Army was stationed around the reservoir because the ships were just flying in and out of the reservoir, whether it was frozen or not. And after about 7 months, the Army just left. But you never heard a story about it. I mean, there were a couple people that tried to get the information about it. From that point on, we were more concerned about that story. This Sergeant 18 and I, we go where he saw his first UFO land up in Wanacue. And we just went up there many years. I don't want to keep going, but it was just so many things happened after that point. But it was kind of like an interesting moment. It was the only time I decided to run back to the truck to get a camera. I mean, I kind of should have just stayed there and tried to communicate with the thing, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I mean, if I would have had my camera, I would have stayed there. If I would have had anything else on me, I would have. But without it, I said, I can't even prove this. So I figured it would chase me back to the truck, which it didn't. But that was my one night with the UFO and the Bigfoot within like 3 days. So it was pretty intense. But I'll cut it off there.
All right. Well, Janet lives in Pennsylvania. Janet, would you like to? I've got a new show starting Tuesday, folks, for cryptids, and with Lon Strickler. He's had the Pause for Paranormal or something. He has monsters and something else, but he'll be on Tuesday. But Janet, you want to talk about your Pennsylvania flying something that would sort of go with today? Did you see it, or your brother did?
There's a lot of Pennsylvania stories. What about
the flying with the red eyes on the bridge? What's it called, Tommy?
That was the, oh, God. Let me get
it goes with Tommy's story.
Wait a minute, stop. I can't think until you stop talking. It was the one that came in from West Virginia. Oh, God. I got to look it up. The one with the wings. Anyway, there was one back in the 60s that was flying around West Virginia, and a bridge collapsed in West Virginia because of this creature that was flying around. I got to get the name of the creature. Come on. Hold on, let me get this. Mothman, the Mothman. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, and I was tracking this down. My brother has a friend who who called the police about the Mothman. Okay, so we're in the live in a little town called Avalon, which is next to Bellevue, which is in Pittsburgh, down the river, heading down to Ohio, and so we get wind of that there was some kind of creature flying around, and later it was called the Mothman. And my brother's closest friend had called the police, and it ended up getting around the neighborhood really fast. So all those kids, everybody, all ages, ran down to the park, and we were all gathered, and they were all running around the park, sharing stories. There was a bunch of people that had encountered it and saw it. And then the newspapers came down, and they took pictures of it. And then years later, I was thinking back on that day, and I go, was that my imagination? Was there really a flying creature with red eyes? But then the book came out, the movies came out. So my brother's friend, he had been in prison for a couple of years. He got out, and he said, I got to tell this story. And he had written down like a whole blow-by-blow accounting of this Mothman. That was so. What happened was it was really tall, and it had like a mechanic. I need to reread it. It was really a detailed, like 9-page account of this creature. And so they ran up to the shelter house. In Avalon, there's only one shelter house, and it's been there since the 1920s or something. And there's a farm behind the shelter house back in the. So anyway, this accounting was he ran up they ran up after the creatures. There were 2 or 3 of them. They were walking. They were about 12 feet tall or something. They went back to the stop sign where they saw how they were. So they measured the stop sign. It was like they were little investigative reporters, but they weren't afraid. They were like chasing after these creatures, and then the creatures saw them chasing them, so they ducked behind a dirt pile. Somebody was digging a hole, I guess, put some pipes in. They ducked behind it, walked past. It was really high drama. And I was trying to get down with my brother, and his friend got scared to tell the story and to come out and put his name to it. And I said, well, we'll just do it anonymously. So I knew they were going to track it down again. But it's really interesting. You think that you're the only one, but here I am, that was 65 or something, 66. And here comes another witness. So I'll have to track it down. Thanks for reminding me about that. I got to write to my brother and say, hey, did you get permission to release the story? I think I have my computer send it to me, and we can always change the name. He had the name of the cop that came down. He had pictures of the article that was in the paper. All the very detailed, and this is like a, 18 or 19-year-old person that had enough foresight to document it. So I'll let you know. I'll look for that for you, Ronnie. That was appropriate for your show here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a Bigfoot story, but I'm going to save it for next week because it takes a while to tell it.
Okay.
And
well, I can tell one about a craft that came, tree height, and maybe you have another one, PJ. So I was coming home. It was 1966. I'm 12 years old. I don't really have a curfew, but I go home because everybody's going home, right? And the crickets are out, and so it must be August because the crickets don't really come out till the end of summer, and they come out really loud when it's hot in the East Coast, from what I remember. And so all of a sudden, I felt something in the back of my head, and I turned around and I looked over towards my best friend at that time. Her name was Patty. When I looked over, she's the lights on, so she was home, and my eyes gone to the treetop, and there's a giant, what do you call it, cigar-shaped craft and it has all the windows. And so I'm looking up into the dark